So let's just start and talk about how we met.
Mm-hmm.
In Tulum, Mexico, at a party. This is Sureya. I'm Lee.
Hi.
And I was feeling pretty antisocial that day. Honestly, I didn't really want to talk to anybody. And we started talking. And sure enough, within 37 seconds, I think we created a space of trust and got pretty vulnerable. And that's when I shared with you that around that time, I felt like I was in a little bit of a energy funk, and I associated it with how much weed I was smoking and how much I was masturbating.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, roughly saying it was like 2 or 3 times of jerking off a day.
Right.
And we kind of...
ran to a tranquilo toilet.
Yeah, and we ran to a tranquilo toilet, just throwing my energy away. So... You have a lot of experience as a student and a teacher with Tantra, and in our conversation through your experiences, I was able to gain a lot of perspective about sexual energy and just bring some light and awareness to a lot of things that I was kind of thinking about. Like, yeah, jerking off 5 times a day kind of makes me tired, but I didn't really realize the deeper implications of the effect it's having on my energy and maybe even how I'm relating to women and perceiving them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I thought this would be a really interesting topic to talk about. I wanted to revisit it, and I know a couple of you guys out there might be interested, women as well, of course. So the first thing I just wanted to talk about was your perception of, let's call it mindless masturbation.
Okay.
And I don't want to be too leading in one direction, but how you may view that as being detrimental to becoming the greatest version of yourself, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, your sexual energy is your chi, and sexual and creative energy are very tightly intertwined, and that is your life force. Like, it is the seed of your creation. We are created through sexual energy. Sex is the precursor to life, and it's powerful energy that we use to create everything we do. And so your vitality is very closely, your vitality is very closely connected to your sexual energy, and as a man, your one ejaculation can populate all of LA. So that's a lot of energy that you're flushing down the toilet in one go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you kind of have a fixed amount of this energy when you're born, and it takes energy to create all this sperm, and every time you release it, you're depleting yourself of very vital energy. And so if you're doing that 2 to 3 times a day, of course it's going to make you tired. It's robbing you of your life force, like very essential vitality. And so also when you're letting it go unconsciously, especially if it's coming as this like, oh my God, there's this sexual energy moving through me, I need to get this out of my system, and you're just kind of like getting it over with really quickly and getting it out of your system, then that seed is getting wasted like completely. There's no intentions being planted with it, and it's just this super sacred, really powerful force that you're just throwing away.
So on that note of a wasted seed, if you will, how could one... Because I know you're not going to sit here and tell me all masturbation is bad. I know that for damn sure.
For sure not.
Yeah, so how does one apply or practice applying intention when masturbating?
So...
whether that's male or female perspective, whatever you can share.
So in Tantra, we call it self-cultivation.
Okay.
So it's very much a practice of working with yourself. First of all, I want to also say that sex, like your primary relationship sexually is with yourself. And so, like, a lot of people feel guilty about masturbating and they think it's bad or they're not supposed to do it. And I want to clarify that masturbation is great, and it's all about how you do it and the intention that you put behind it.
Sure.
So I'm definitely not here to tell anyone not to masturbate. Actually, I'm here to tell you to masturbate as often as you'd like, as long as you're doing it intentionally. And I mean, really, you do it however you want. Tantra is about finding your yes and living that. So even anything I say, assume I'm full of shit until you experience it to be true for yourself.
Okay.
It's all about finding what resonates for you, which is going to be different for everyone. But if you are working towards increasing your vitality and having a deep, rich, fulfilling sex life, then self-cultivation is a really amazing way to work with that energy and to cultivate deep self-love, deep connection with your body. Sex is primarily stemming from your relationship with yourself. So almost any sexual problem that anyone has, it's usually rooted deeply within some sort of wound or trauma or blockage they're experiencing internally. It's usually not that something's wrong with their body or that it's an external person causing this problem. So with self-cultivation, it's about developing this deep, rich understanding of your body and your sexual energy and taking the time to do that. So the first thing that kind of turns mindless masturbation into conscious self-cultivation is presence. Getting really, really present with your body, with what you're thinking about, what you're fantasizing about, what kind of intentions you have in this practice. Really making love to yourself. Let this be a self-love practice.
This is where, this was very new to me. You asked me if I would have sex with a woman in the hostel bathroom that I'm jerking off in 3 times a day. And I thought about it, and I said in an extreme situation, I would have sex with a woman in that bathroom. But generally speaking, like, would you have sex with the goddess that you adore in the Rancho Tranquilo bathroom, or would you be lighting the candles, setting a nice kind of atmosphere for you to really enjoy that experience?
Exactly.
And then I realized that this was, once again, another beautiful lesson of self-love. And it's like the way I'm treating and loving other women that I have love for, there's a huge gap between how I'm treating myself sexually. And I never even thought about it until you hit me with it. And I'm still like just like jerking off in the Starbucks bathroom. But like I'm working on it. It used to be McDonald's.
At least
step
it up to like Olive Garden, you know?
Olive Garden. Jeez. Alright, I'll try.
Well, and I think a lot of us experience that disparity with the way we love ourselves and the way we love other people in terms of how we talk to ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how we stand up for ourselves versus how we would for another person. And so this is just another level of really taking your self-love to the next level that will affect all the areas of your life and just ripple out in a really positive way. But when you masturbate, like really make it a practice of how much can you love yourself? How juicy can you make it? How much can you really just adore and honor yourself? And to be present with every sensation. Set the mood, like make your room super nice and beautiful. Set up candles, incense, music, whatever it is that makes you feel good, the same kind of way that you would get romantic with a partner. And really take the time to feel your body, feel every single sensation. Tune into the 5 senses. Those are ways that you can stay really present and embodied through your practice. And porn and fantasizing are okay in certain situations. Everybody has their way of going about things, but if you're wanting to cultivate really deep presence with your self-cultivation practice, it's really good if you can learn to turn yourself on with your own body and your own energy and not be thinking elsewhere, because when you're thinking elsewhere, you're not present right here, right now. And so you want to be fully present with the sensations, and that's where having music and smells and tastes and touch and all these different senses can really ground you into this experience right here, right now, instead of kind of projecting off into some fantasy reality.
I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were guiding me in the direction to be turned on by myself and to use that and to feel and to masturbate that way rather than relying on a visual external source, which in many times is porn.
Right.
Which I guess brings us to our next segment, which should just be talking about porn addiction and potential effect that it's having on people. So just a quick summary of my experience, because that's all I can speak for. I was a virgin until I was 21, and boy was I addicted to porn. Like, fuck. Yeah, it was bad. Like 3 or 4 times a day during college, just jerking off to porn, and years later, I still watch porn, and I want to work away from it. I don't think it's necessarily like the worst thing in the world to watch porn, but I found that like when I was more dependent on porn to get off, my relationship with women was out of whack. I was objectifying them so much more. When I'm watching porn, I'm like skipping through. I got 4 windows open. I'm watching a little bit of this, closing that one, going to a little bit of that. It's like fucking scatterbrain everywhere. And I just have an instinctual feeling that it's not the healthiest behavior for my sexual energy and my sexual relationship with women.
Right.
I'm curious just what you think about porn in general and the effect it has.
Right. So, and
is it all bad?
Okay, so one of the core concepts in Tantra is that there's no such thing as good or bad.
Nice.
And again, it's finding your own truth, your own yes. So really, I think it's important to talk about porn without any judgment, because also I think a lot of people carry a lot of shame and guilt around it, and this is further detrimental to your sexuality and your whole relationship to yourself with that. So, in my opinion, the current porn situation is not ideal for cultivating really healthy, thriving sexuality. It's not porn that's the problem per se. It's the way that porn is carried out and the way that people use it can be really problematic, because a lot of it is giving really unrealistic expectations of what sex is. And for a lot of people, that's their main source of education. We have like abstinence education in school or whatever limited things they teach us, and porn. And so even if like a lot of girls never really watched porn so much, and they're still really exposed to it because those expectations are being projected onto them by any of the men they're sleeping with.
Good point.
And so there's a lot of objectification going on, a lot of violence, a lot of hardcore stuff that isn't a lot of people's style of how they would like to have sex, but it's all they've seen, it's all they've known. And you have this problem where there's a lot of really, really, really young people being exposed to porn now, especially with the high-speed internet. Our generation is facing a particularly unique phenomenon that hasn't really happened before. When your neuroplasticity is so high, when you're young, you're carving neural pathways around relating to sex through this type of porn, and it's a lot harder to undo that addiction if you got hooked on it really young. Whereas like men that didn't get addicted to high-speed internet porn until their 30s or something, it's a lot easier for them to come out of it because their brain wasn't still developing when they developed that addiction. So it gives us a really unrealistic idea of what sex is supposed to be, what a woman's body is supposed to look like, how she's supposed to act. Actually, the female orgasm and female sexuality works in a very different way than how it's portrayed in porn. And so then there's even a lot of women thinking that something's wrong with them because they don't orgasm like the porn stars do.
Why aren't I squirting everywhere?
Exactly. So there's a lot of this, and also so much of the intimacy element is lacking in porn because they've got to keep their arms out of the way for the camera and all of this. But so often when we're being intimate with somebody, like we're using our hands, like the hands are extensions of our heart. We're lovingly touching somebody when we care about them, when we're intimate with them. So much of our expression of love through our sexuality comes through this closeness and this more artistic, loving way of relating and touching with somebody that you don't see so much in porn.
No, you don't. And for me, a lot of what you were just describing is my story. I think, I don't know about high-speed internet porn, but internet porn was in my youth. And shit, man, I thought women wanted to get like jackhammered, fucked, and like it ended up with me just like masturbating with her vagina basically.
Right.
And there was no connection, and I mean it wasn't until years later that I started to really like how do you say, like remove the conditioning of what I put myself through from my porn addiction. But boy, like it's still fucking there.
Totally.
And I accept that, but I want to learn more about it so that I can kind of become more aware, and I think naturally the changes that are supposed to happen will happen.
Right. And you know, the thing is, we're all just fumbling around in the dark when it comes to sexuality, but we're all expected to know what we're doing. And so, of course, like, how could you know any better? That was how you were exposed to sex, and that's what you need to do. And who knows what was happening on the girl's end. Maybe she's like, okay, that's what sex is about? Like, geez, what's all this cracked up to be? And we're all so confused. We all have our egos tied up in our performance and what it's supposed to look like. And nobody teaches us how to connect consciously, how to have eye contact, how to communicate, how to breathe together, how to touch lovingly. And
the breathing's a great one.
Huge one. And so, you know, porn doesn't have any of this. It also really puts us in this mindset of, like, one, being addicted to novelty, like you said, having 4 things, not being able to maintain focus, like constantly needing that new dopamine blast from, like, the next best thing. And that's how people get addicted to really hardcore porn, because what did it last time isn't doing it this time, and you get a tolerance. And so, yeah, oftentimes, you know, people aren't even really into, like, they're not that necessarily truly turned on by what they're seeing, but it's the novelty shock factor. It's like what they need to excite them, and that comes from a lack of presence and a lack of intention. And so another big piece of tantra is just, like, really learning to slow down and be present and not have expectation. But when you have this hyper focus on orgasm, and often if you're a young kid and you're, like, you know, trying to get it done before mom and dad won't come home or whatever, you're training yourself to go really fast with it and you're busting out as quickly as you can.
Yeah, Starbucks bathroom, you can't take too much time. McDonald's, I had a little more time. Starbucks, you got it.
Exactly.
In and out. I haven't jerked off in and out yet, but coming soon. I don't jerk off anymore.
So then we're seeing the problem with premature ejaculation, like, majorly in young men. And then even erectile dysfunction, like men who can't get turned on by a real woman in front of them because of the novelty addiction, what they've been seeing through the whole porn world. So.
And to that point, I think, I mean, this is all just a story I'm telling myself, right? I don't know what the fuck is really going on here. But I think what happened to me was being a virgin and watching so much porn. I had these expectations of what performance is supposed to be like and how a woman is supposed to react to a good sex and how big my dick is supposed to be. Like, fuck. And what happened to me was I ended up putting all this pressure on myself due to these expectations. And with that pressure, I would fall short of those expectations. Maybe I wouldn't be able to maintain an erection. And then I get super down on myself. And it got to the point where I was so fearful of that embarrassment happening again. And then I'll just watch some porn instead.
Right.
And then I just slipped deeper and deeper into it. And it wasn't until I really started having relationships with women where I felt comfortable with them and vulnerable enough to fucking communicate. And it's what you were saying before, like, porn teaches a lot of us about sex, and we think this and we think that, and, like, even if a woman doesn't watch sex because the men she's having sex with do, it's having an effect on her experience. At the end of the day, I think it, maybe not all, but I can't stress enough the importance of open communication around this. And that's exactly why we're talking about it right now. I don't think, in my experience and in my circles at least, I'm not exposed to too much open, vulnerable conversation about this stuff, particularly between a man and a woman. And to me, just talking about it is highly interesting, but I also want to encourage society to be more open about this. If I think about how much time and energy I spent on sex and thinking about it, fuck, it's most of my life. And I'm like, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but holy shit, we could be getting a lot more fulfillment if we just talk to each other about it.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to open that door.
We all have the same insecurities and fears, and when you open that door and you start talking about it, it's so much less scary.
Of course. Of course. And that was a big thing for me, was moving away from just trying to have sex because it was what is cool, and like I was trying to validate myself, and then operating in a space of like only having sex with people, with women that I've met, had a connection with, and now it's led to this physical interaction.
Right.
Whereas before, I mean, I was going out at night with the intention, maybe not having sex that night, but like I was going out with the intention of getting closer to having sex.
Right.
And I had that intention without having met the woman.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just going out like, I want to fuck. And maybe that's natural and maybe that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that when I just go out, like, I'm here for myself to have a good time with my friends and listen to this music, whatever it is, and things naturally happen. Then maybe I meet a woman, we start talking, there's a connection, and it naturally builds to where it's going to go.
Right.
And I found so much more fulfillment in that. And the whole premature ejaculation, and I don't know if it's technically erectile dysfunction, but issues with maintaining a boner because of my anxiety went out the window in these cases when I was having a legitimate connection first.
Right, because you have that trust, that safety, that communication. It creates a foundation to be able to connect in a fulfilling way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because when I was younger and I was a virgin, I was super paranoid about not performing well enough.
Mm-hmm.
So there was women I was meeting that were a bit more promiscuous, and they were like pushing the button to like, let's have sex, and I was like, I'm fucking terrified of you,
right.
You know what I mean? And I just like run away from them, and I only started to have sex when I was meeting people that I felt comfortable with, and I'm actually really grateful for that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like I was just going around like, oh, this chick's hot, and having, empty sex. Not to say, if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
Right.
But my experiences through insecurity led me to a place to establish trust before having sex.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in the bigger picture, I'm realizing like that's exactly how I want it to be.
Right.
So maybe it came from a place of insecurity, but I'm grateful to have had that perspective and now this behavior.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you just about, there's so many double standards, particularly in sex, when it comes to men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a conversation with a female friend earlier today. She grew up in Texas, and she was mentioning how a lot of her female friends are raised in very traditional families, and they don't masturbate. And there's even, in times, this sort of slutty, almost shaming view that maybe parts of society are putting on women masturbating, for example. And whereas like guys get the free pass,
Right.
It's just like, it's expected that guys jerk off and that's what they do. And I know for me, I started jerking off to like women's tennis in 7th grade probably. And you mentioned earlier that you didn't really have the same path.
Mm-hmm.
So you share with us how you got into masturbation and how you've noticed differences in your own life from learning your body yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So back to the concept of self-cultivation. Well, actually backtracking. Okay, so a lot of women don't masturbate. A lot of women do, and a lot of women don't. One thing, I think the double standard is definitely a thing. I think that in general, it's more accepted for men to be openly sexual, and for women we have such a double standard where we're supposed to be sexy, but then we're also sluts if we own that.
Sorry. It's ridiculous. Yeah, seriously.
It's a really double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Also, our genitals are internal, and it's dark in there, and it's hard to see, and it's hard to reach, and it's hard to know what's
Still
going
looking
on.
for that G-spot. Where the fuck is it?
You wouldn't believe how many women don't even know they have a G-spot or
Right.
what that is or where it is, and we have all these pleasure buttons inside of us that so many of us don't know about.
Sure.
We're not given the treasure map in school.
Right.
There's quite a treasured map to buried pleasure, and it's hard to find, and it's a lot easier for women to masturbate with toys, but also vibrators can be problematic in terms of cultivating sensitivity and knowing how to show your partner what you like. And so there can be a dependency on that. And again, when you're working with self-cultivation, it's really great to know how to derive your turn on from yourself and how to work with what you've got and not needing something external. So again, nothing wrong with vibrators, but it's really great to learn how to feel the inside of your body with your own hands and the outside, the clitoris, but to know what you really like and to get to know your own body really well, what you like and what you don't like, so that you can communicate that with your partner. Because a lot of women are expecting their man to know what to do, but it's like, if we don't even know what we like, how are they supposed to know? Like, we've at least had the opportunity to explore the inner landscapes, but you guys don't have that until you're with a woman, and so it's like, how are you supposed to know what's going on inside of us if we don't even know?
Well, just hit you with a good old jackhammer, right?
Exactly.
She likes it.
And so I think it's really important for women to get to tune into their own bodies in that way, learning to work with that energy. Personally, yeah, I was never much of a masturbator until I got into my tantric studies, because, yeah, I don't know, it never was something that I really felt the need to do so much, because or if I did feel the need to, like, I didn't really know how to go about it in a way that was satisfying, and it was kind of like...
To that point, can you shed some light of how you found the introductory stage, or what interested you, right?
In Tantra and masturbation?
Yeah, and masturbation, I guess, through your understanding of Tantra.
So Tantra, and I also want to clarify, like, Tantra is a huge realm. It's an art, a science, a philosophy, a lifestyle, rooted in ancient traditions from the Far East, and it includes so much more than sexuality, and so we are focusing on sacred sexuality, conscious intimacy in this talk, but it's so much about living in wholeness and connection with your true essence and everything around you, and then from that stems this concept of sacred sexuality, and it's one piece of it.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's important, because in the West, everyone's like, oh, Tantra, that means sex, and it's really important that we understand, like I said, how sex, everything about sex is rooted in your relationship to yourself, and so it's stemming from this giant place of wholeness, and Tantra helps us cultivate that on every level of our lives, not just sexuality.
Yeah, and I love, just through our conversations, how much of this just comes right back to the good old lesson of self-love.
Always.
Yeah, so get back to jerking off, though. How did you get into it? Enough of this non-sexual Tantra talk.
So, in Tantra, like, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, I can't learn Tantra because I don't have a partner right now, but they actually suggest that you start your tantric practice on your own, because it's a lot easier to work with your sexual energy when you don't have the volatile excitement of another person's presence there. So self-cultivation is actually a huge piece of Tantra. So people sometimes think like, oh, if I'm learning Tantra, that means I have to stop masturbating. That's completely wrong. You actually need to masturbate. So I'm in a school program right now for Tantric coaching, and my homework is self-cultivation all the time. So I masturbated before this podcast.
Boom! I didn't.
Hey, there's a change.
Yeah, seriously.
And so yeah, it's actually it's a really important piece of learning your body, learning to connect with yourself, learning how to circulate and refine your chi, your sexual energy. So we're working with energy a lot during self-cultivation, and to be able to understand that, you need to start by working with your own, square one. And so that's how I got into it. And at first it was like a foreign thing to me, and I was kind of like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know if I like this, especially because when it's your homework, you have to show up for it on a regular basis. You can't just really wait for the inspiration to strike. So kind of back to what we were talking earlier about doing it in a conscious way, moving into a place of presence, really deriving your turn on from yourself, being present with your body, setting your intentions with it, working with the energy. Breathing is so, so essential. It's something that we always forget to do as humans, I think.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything.
It is. Yeah.
So breathing your sexual energy through your whole body and learning to circulate it. A lot of us focus our sexual energy on the genitals, and every part of your body can be an erogenous zone if you wake it up. I mean, you can have thumbgasms and eargasms and footgasms, and every single part of your body can be in total orgasmic bliss if you wake the whole thing up. And so when you're just focusing on your genitals, the energy is really concentrated there, and it's a lot harder to not come so quickly. So when we're self-cultivating, we're moving the energy up through our body. We're dispersing it everywhere. We do that with touch. You can do it by like, stroking your body, like waking up all the other areas, giving yourself a massage, like all the other parts of yourself that you love to be touched, and playing with different types of touch. Don't just do your go-to, whatever gets you off quickly. Everyone's got their favorite little move that they know is going to do the trick.
It goes like this. Works every time though.
It depends on what you're working towards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we like to think of it as prolonging pleasure. Like, how long can you soak up this juiciness?
Yeah.
How long can you feel good for?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about like what you don't want to do, like how long can I not come for?
Right.
Think about like what it is that you are doing. You're just relishing this luscious space.
Nice.
Of just loving yourself. And so you're spreading it through your body with visualization, with breath. Sound is really important. So as you're breathing, sigh with sound. Like exhale and allow sound to move through you. The throat and the pelvis are really connected. So the more that your throat is open and relaxed, the more your pelvis is going to be open and relaxed.
Wow.
Yeah, the sacral and throat chakra are sister chakras. So they're very tightly connected. So moving your energy in those ways, being really conscious with your thoughts, like what is it that you want to be thinking about while you're in this space, because you're manifesting whatever it is you're thinking about. Like you don't want to be thinking about some weird unconscious shit that you don't actually feel good about and then putting your sexual energy behind
Wow.
that.
So on that note, wow, I've had quite a bit of procrastination masturbation. Like conscious escapism.
Right.
Of like, I'm stressed out, I don't want to go do my taxes right now, and I've already jerked off twice today. But I'm going to go jerk off to escape this, and I'm going into this masturbation session like with an anxious mind. And then I'm stroking myself out, and I feel just utter emptiness, hollow after. And, I'm pretty self-aware to know that that's not a good feeling. But yeah, it's like a lot of my masturbation has actually come as a form of escapism, and a lot of times what I'm escaping is something that's kind of stressful or something that I'm trying to ignore or run away from.
Right.
And then I'm bringing that into my sexual kingdom here, like you just said.
Right. So this is a really good thing to touch on, actually. That's why having a clear intention is really good. So our sexual energy can be used towards so many things. Like I said, our sexual and creative energy are tightly intertwined. So you can use this as a way to ramp up your vitality and your motivation to go do what it is you need to do, especially if you don't ejaculate. Also, we haven't gotten into the fact that orgasm and ejaculation are separate. I don't know if right now is a good place to get into that or not.
Sure, yeah.
I don't want to get too sidetracked, but essentially you can orgasm without ejaculating. So like, I'm not saying you can never orgasm again by practicing Tantra. In fact, you can have much deeper, full body, prolonged orgasms that come in plateaus like this. They build and build and build, and then they plateau, and they build and build, and you reach a new octave every time. Whereas a typical ejaculation is like, it's like that sharp peak, and then you're done. And I mean, maybe you can get it up and go again, maybe you can't, but often you're going to go to sleep because you just depleted your energy.
Yeah.
So instead, when you're self-cultivating, you're learning how to ride this edge. And so this is great for discipline, both with your sexual energy and all other aspects of your life, because you're riding this edge. You're learning to work with edges, which requires discipline and direction and focus. And it's a great way to really harness like those masculine qualities of yourself, both as a woman and a man, just masculine energy of focus, direction, purpose. So when you're self-cultivating, you're bringing yourself to that edge to like an 8 or a 9, and 10 being that you're ejaculating, and then back off a bit. And I guess I could get into the breath work right now. This is kind of sidetracked, but it's a good place to put it. We'll go back to the intention behind it. But for somebody who is wanting to kind of start working with this. So you want to bring yourself to an 8 or a 9. You'll find kind of where your point of no return is, and you want to stop before then. And so then stop stimulating yourself. Inhale and pulse your PC muscle, which is the muscle that you use to stop yourself from peeing midstream. And so you'll pulse that muscle, visualize orange energy coming up your spine into your head, and hold your breath as you pulse that, and then release with a sound, like, and release all your muscles. And then do it again, and do a couple of those breaths until you feel like you can, like you've backed away from your edge.
Okay.
And then you can keep going. And so that practice is going to help you learn how to separate ejaculation from orgasm. And this is a great practice to do if, let's say, you're procrastinating and you're like, oh, I think I'll just masturbate.
Yeah.
Instead of repressing that you want to masturbate, you can actually use it to your advantage and use it as a tool to be more productive with what it is that you're wanting to do. So you could set your intention beforehand. You could say, okay, I'm going to go do my taxes, or I'm going to write this blog, or whatever it is that you've been avoiding doing. And channel that sexual energy into creative energy. Like, visualize yourself absolutely crushing it at whatever your intention is while you masturbate.
Yeah.
And so really, like, visualize yourself just owning that and set your intentions. And you can also
own these taxes.
Exactly. And you can also really use positive affirmations really effectively in this space. Your unconscious mind